But when Paul's speaking about our calling, at one point he says, think about it when you were called. Not many of you were wise. Not many of you were with power. Not many of you were kings or in position. And he said, but God chose what was not to shame what is. Amen. He says, God chose the weak things to shame the strong. He chose the poor things to shame the rich. But he uses that word specifically. It's kind of a weird phrase, a weird way of saying it. But he chose those things that were not to shame those things that are. And and to me, this is, the reason we talk about that, because I think when we're speaking of this is how it fits with the Imago Dei, that we do think that of all the ways that we image the Father, one of the strongest quality traits that we share with God himself is the ability to create. Mm-hmm. We are a creative people. You created a podcast. We got artists, musicians. We also can create life. We also can give birth to families and create, and we can design. And yet that's the distinction, that God alone is the only one who's able. And that includes Satan and his power and minions too, that he is the only one that can create out of nothing. Take these dry bones and make them walk. But I think for us, it's a great encouragement. Like as we're thinking about this topic of missions, for us to recognize that we as the church, we as individuals, we as the church, as members of the church, have an enormous amount of ability to think creatively and to be able to design by the power of the Spirit, to think and to pray, Lord, how might you ask us in this day and age, in this time, because this is when I live, and this is when Brandon lives, and we're here right now, and you have given us this moment in time, maybe 60 years, maybe 80 years. It's just a breath in the grand scheme of things. But right now we're here, and how would you ask us, the church, to participate in the Great Commission right now? That was, that time at EPC, at General Assembly, when we had the breakout session, that's how we ended it. It was incredible for about 15 or 20 minutes just to sit with other parishioners and to ask that question, right? I mean, regardless of whatever you've been doing in the past, what does it mean for us right now, right? Given the body of people that are in your church right now, given the gifts, the talents, the unique perspective on the world, their callings, their financial situations, whatever it is, where you are geographically in Louisiana, what does it mean for you right now to think creatively about how God might call you to participate in the Great Commission? So
that's a good question, but I don't know how to answer that. Right?
No, it's okay. It takes some thinking. It's not a quick answer, because, like I said, things are changing, and we, even as a denomination, are having to think about this. Yeah. What does it look like for us over the fact that, like in Michigan right now, where I just was, huge populations of Muslims that have come here to these shores. What does that mean for the EPC churches that are right there in Detroit right now? What does that mean for them, right? And what does it mean for me here in Northeast Georgia? What does it mean in Louisiana? What does it mean in California? And given all the things that are happening right now in this world, what we have available to us by technology, the fact that we actually have missionaries from Africa that are being sent to America now. We have missionaries from Korea that are being sent to America now, that we have international churches popping up that don't even speak English in our towns and in our cities. What does it mean for Americans, for the EPC, for those of us here right now? What is missions going to look like? How do we participate in the Great Commission? What is God doing? I think those are the kind of questions that I think are a great place to land with your listeners to this. Like that's the question. It can linger. I don't have to have all the solutions to that. I think it's very individualized in terms of the communities that you find yourself in. But that's the question. Are we listening? Are we putting our ear down and we're saying, God, if this is true, if the church has been created for mission, living on mission, what does it look like for us to be faithful in this moment in time? What does it look like?
Amen. And then one question or one statement that I'm going to make before we take a quick break.
Sure.
Is one of the things that I long for is that on my deathbed, I am still working the Great Commission. I am still preaching the gospel, even on my deathbed.
Yes.
Right before I take my last breath, the biggest prayer I have is that my entire family, they all say they're believers, but I want my entire family at that point to wholeheartedly believe. I want them to have the same faith that I have.
Yeah.
So even on my deathbed, I want the Great Commission to speak louder than it's ever spoken before.
That's a beautiful vision.
That's my vision.
Hey guys, thank you for listening to this episode. We'll be right back after the break.
Hey guys, don't forget, purchase your copy of The Beauty of the Local Church, the Westminster Society Journal, Volume 3. It is now available on Amazon for $16. Purchase your copy today.
Greetings. This is Steve Salyards, the author of the GA Junkie, and here are some Presbyterian history notes for the week of July 21st. Sunday, July 21st. On this day in 1831, Joseph Torrance was born. He was raised in western Pennsylvania, trained at Iberia College in Ohio, and ordained in the abolitionist Free Presbyterian Church, and served churches in western Pennsylvania. When the Free Presbyterian Church dissolved after the Civil War, he joined the old school branch of the PCUSA and served churches in Indiana and Ohio. For Monday, July 22nd. In 1689, the Scottish Parliament passed an act abolishing prelacy in Scotland. The act eliminated multiple ecclesiastical ranks and declared that there shall be no ecclesiastical position higher than that of presbyter. It is one of the few acts predating the 1707 Union that is still in force. Tuesday, July 23rd. Calvary Presbyterian Church in San Francisco was founded in 1854. The group of about 60 members quickly constructed a building which was the largest Protestant church building on the West Coast at that time. The church has moved twice since then. The current building suffered little damage in the 1906 earthquake and was able to host other churches and the city courts as San Francisco rebuilt. Wednesday, July 24th. On this day in 1904, Dr. Lefferts A. Letcher was born. He served as a pastor in Pennsylvania, and then a Princeton Theological Seminary professor and church historian. He was a prolific author on church history, including popular literature on Presbyterian history, such as A Brief History of the Presbyterians and The Broadening Church. Thursday, July 25th. This is the 200th anniversary of the birth of Abraham Gossman. He was a longtime New Jersey pastor and member of the board of Princeton Theological Seminary, serving as an officer of the board at various times. He was also a noted theologian in his own right and an author. Friday, July 26th. In 1899, at Eagle, Alaska, the Presbytery of the Yukon held its first meeting. 3 of the 5 teaching elders were present, and the Reverend S.A. Hall was elected the first moderator. The presbytery is geographically large, covering most of Alaska, and today their churches worship in 4 languages. Saturday, July 27th. On this day in 1681, Donald Cargill was hanged in Edinburgh. He was a Covenanter pastor, helped found what would be the Reformed Presbyterian Church in Scotland, and was an active resistor to the religious restrictions placed on the Covenanters. He is believed to be the co-author, along with Mr. Henry Hall, of the Queensferry paper, discovered about a year earlier. That was a proposed covenant for Presbyterianism and against the king. After several narrow escapes, Cargill was finally apprehended on July 12th, found guilty, and sent to the gallows. His final words are reported to be, "The Lord knows I go on this ladder with less fear and perturbation of mind than I ever entered the pulpit to preach." Thank you for joining me here on the EAR podcast, and I look forward to joining you again next week.
Hi, this is Christy Lundy with Bucket List Travels, specializing in faith-based trips. I work with a tour company that has over 40 years experience and over 40 itineraries to choose from. These trips are all inclusive and offer payment plans, making it a reality for most of your congregation to participate in. Your church family will bond with each other in a deep and meaningful way by experiencing these locations together. Bring the Bible to life by visiting these locations in which the accounts took place. Walk in the footsteps of Jesus, Old Testament prophets, and New Testament disciples. After deciding the itinerary your church would love and benefit from the most, I will take over all planning, travel arrangements, information meetings, collecting documents, information, and payments, leaving you the time to be able to prepare for the trip as the spiritual leader of the group. You can create small Bible studies, devotionals, and focused prayer times. If this sounds like a valuable investment for your church, contact me by email at bucketlisttravelagent@gmail.com or message me on Facebook at Bucket List Travels by Christy Lundy to set up your phone call or meeting today. Have a blessed day.
Hey guys, I'm glad you stuck around. Now let's get back to the conversation.
Welcome back to this episode, The Church and the Great Commission with Stephen Woodworth. Welcome back, Steve.
Hello, welcome back to you as well.
Alrighty. Okay, so we're going to start off this section, and this is basically going to be personal questions for you to answer so we can kind of get an idea of what your responses would be as far as Great Commission and missions would go.
Okay.
So what are the benefits of the Great Commission to the church?
Well, I think if we're thinking again, when you use that terminology, if folks have been listening in on this show, then I hope that they're growing in their understanding, their awareness that when we use that terminology, we are no longer just speaking about that one time that Jesus mentions this in Matthew 28, but the larger picture that God is speaking to. But I do think that it's important. I mean, even as we talk about it now, I do think that to be sensitive to the fact that a lot of people, that is what they're going to think of. They're going to think of the Great Commission as this act of going out and sharing the gospel, this act of going out and being a missionary, even if you're not a full-time one, but that there's sort of like a programmatic thinking about outside of all the other things that I do, then here's some missionary activity. I think I've already said why I think that's a little bit problematic, but to your question again, so ask the question again, and I want to think about it in terms of how most people might hear that term if you ask it again.
Okay. So what are the benefits of the Great Commission to the church?
Okay. So benefits of the Great Commission. I mean, number one, it's being obedient. And so that, that's the purpose of the church, is to participate with God in the Great Commission. Secondly, like when we think about it in the wider perspective, I think that especially, and we might be going there anyways, but the picture that we have in the book of Revelation of every tribe, nation, and tongue coming to the table, there is something so sweet and so necessary for us to understand God fully, that we would be in the presence of a communion of saints that's beyond just the four walls of our church. And so participating in the Great Commission allows us to experience the fullness of God in a way that is very unique. I do think because everybody is made in the image of God, if I have not had the opportunity to be in the presence of a Chinese Christian and a Japanese Christian and a Christian from Russia and Ukraine and France, and there is a picture there of something of God that I am missing. I really think that, that these are all people that are made in the image of God. Their culture reflects something of the image of God, their food, their values, their perspective. I think sometimes we run into the difficulty, and not intentionally, but we do tend to think that God speaks English and he's a white American, right? That's who God is.
Or black with dreads.
Or black with dreads. That's right. And so I think there's a necessity for us, and the EPC, we're guilty of that. We're guilty of that. And you look around something like a GA, and not everybody looks like you, Brandon. It's just we've got a very small system in terms of, and I don't think that's intentional. I don't think anybody has said we don't want to look like Brandon, we want to look like Steve. But the reality is that over time, the more and more you are confirmed in that sort of view of Christianity, that Christianity for you is walking into a church that is primarily white. It's got a white male pastor at the beginning of the pulpit, that like God starts to take on those characteristics. And I think we miss something of the character of God, the attributes of God, if we are not actively involved in his work of drawing all people to himself.
That is absolutely true. And yes, I do attend, I can't say an all white church because I'm the only black person that goes there.
So you can say it all white then.
But I do attend a predominantly white church. There we go. That's a better word.
Yeah, predominantly white.
But the EPC is very open to accepting others.
Yes.
And
I
I think our biggest struggle is culture and ethnicity. I think those are going to be our two biggest issues. Style of music, style of worship.
Yep.
That's going to throw a hindrance on, because look, we are Presbyterian. We are known for our Reformed theology. And we don't want to lose that. And yes, I'm going to admit,